o'clock, and of course you're all welcome to stay with us and enjoy some drinks and some more networking as well. So I have Abby Lee, who is the director from Acacia Executive Search Panel, performing the duties of moderator for this session, and she's joined, Abby, I'm going to let you introduce everyone. The topic is diversity, moving from why to how. Will you please make them very welcome, everyone?
Thanks, Chrissy. Thanks for joining us on this afternoon's panel. The topic is diversity, moving from how to. Well, I guess when you're talking about diversity, it's been such a huge topic in the industry, and companies have come a long way in terms of achieving it, but we really want to talk about, now that you have achieved it, like how can we best nurture it and ensure that companies are really, holding on to their diverse workforce. I think when you're looking at investors, certainly diversity in their management teams is a huge part of their capital deployment. So we want to make sure that, companies here today are also considering some topics that we're going to talk about. So I just want to introduce my amazing panel today. We have to my left is Anna Shea, the Director Innovation at RCF Capital. Most recently, she worked as part of the management team and the Australasian Alternatives Fund in various roles with FMG and New York as an investment banker. Her varied background and expertise in both investing, advising and capital raising for these stakeholder groups place her in a unique position to have a broad understanding and how various capital classes can support mining companies through their various stages of growth and innovation. Next, we have Purnima Gandhi, who has over 15 years of global experience in investment banking, private and public equity, focusing on energy and climate technologies. She's been with the investments and portfolio development team at Temasek International in Singapore for 11 years, and prior to this, she was with Citigroup in energy investment banking in London. Last but not least is Graham Alverson, the CEO for Australian Vanadium. Recently completed a merger and intends to be the 4th vanadium producer in the world. So Graham's strong project development background, and particularly in future-facing commodities such as vanadium, lithium and nickel, I'm sure he's certainly the man for the job. So just to kick off with our first question, I'm going to have Purnima answer. I think in terms of investment banking and diversity, being in a senior female leadership role is probably one of the hardest things to achieve. So I would love for you to just share with the group your experiences in diversity and your views in general.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the ones who are sitting here, because I know there's great coffee outside, or not so great according to Aussie standards. But I think just in terms of, maybe I can use an example of what I actually was facing today. So I got up in the morning ready to take out my formal suit to be wearing on the panel, and I thought to myself, how is a suit appropriate when I'm talking on a diversity panel, which is as much of a corporate uniform as we can get? So I said, why not wear something formal, but from a different culture? But I can just tell you that me wearing this sari today has taken a lot of effort, and I'm sure when I walk into the room or talking to people, the questions are, what's she going to say? Is she too different? She looks different. And I can tell you that how I felt different today versus when I was here at the conference yesterday. I felt self-doubt. I asked my husband probably 5 times before leaving the house, are you sure? Are you sure? Finally, he was like, just get out. Like, stop asking. And to me, it was almost like, turned out to be a little bit of an experiment by the end of it, that I was asking myself more questions, doubting myself, lower confidence than even just yesterday. And so, to me, I think that's what diversity and inclusion is about. It's about that feeling that you could be visually different. It doesn't have to mean just you're on a gender lens. It could be neurodiversity. It could be orientation. It could be whatever it is. You're different from the majority in the room. And how does that make you as an individual feel? But how does it make other people in the audience or who you're interacting with feel? And therefore, companies, whether it's financial institutions or others, have a very hard task, because sometimes just being same is easy. You play the same sport, you do the same thing, it's easier. In this case, you have to make that additional effort for companies or the majority to sort of take that one step forward to make you feel included. And for the one who is slightly different, to take that one step out, to try to be a part. And so it's that sort of a diversity and inclusion. In essence, today I understood it. It just means it's a two-way relationship. And both need to sort of make that effort. The rest we can talk about in terms of the policies, et cetera, et cetera. But that was my sort of learning from today morning. But in terms of the financial sector and what you asked, I think most of us have come here despite the sort of organization, not because, but I'm just hoping that we can actually put in some things which make it easier for the next generation to come through.
Yeah, and I think they're amazing points, because when I saw you today, I didn't think anything different. So it's definitely an internal mental thing as well. I think with diversity, it's very much a conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the things that you spoke about are very resonant to that. And you've got funds like, BlackRock, Perennial, that are actually putting out targets as investors, looking at ASX 300 companies. I actually want to see it happen, particularly at a board level. So I'm keen to get your view, Anna, in terms of the roles that you've, currently with RCF Capital, in terms of when you're looking at, companies and teams, how do you assess diversity, and how, what does good look like?
Yeah, thanks, Abs, and thanks for having us here today, and to everyone in the crowd. I guess I start from fundamentals. It's partly my training, but also the way that I see the world. So change requires change, and change is inherently uncomfortable. So if you start there and you say, okay, well, how are we going to evolve as opposed to a revolution? We have to just try things that are different, and probably how I've ended up in an innovation strategy, because we like to try different things, whether it's new technology or other. And so when we're thinking about what our role is in the capital markets, we're custodians of capital for large pension funds around the world, for endowments, for foundations, some of whom are probably your investors as well in the crowd. And they say to us, well, our expectations are X or Y, and that may be around a number of things. It would be investment returns and all the commercial elements, but also how do we make the world a better place? How do we generate a better outcome than where we are today? And so as custodians of capital, we look at both the qualitative and the quantitative KPIs, I guess. And part of what we do when we go in and we're looking at new companies that we're going to allocate capital to, we'll say, well, how different is this group to the next group? And it's an opportunity cost. And so if there's a group of folks over here who look different, sound different, have different ideas, have healthier, more robust conversations as a team, we know that higher performing teams will have a higher level of diversity, and that equals higher revenue, higher profitability. And so it's all about creating value, but doing it in a way, I guess, where you can tie it back to, what makes a good team and high performance.
Great answer, yeah. And it's, Graham, I want to talk about you, because Australian Vanadium have a 50% gender diverse board, which is so fantastic. What is Australian Vanadium's view on diversity, and how do you achieve it?
Sure. First of all, it's a privilege to be here with speakers who are far more elegant at explaining these topics, but I think what we have at AVL truly is unique for maybe the class of investment we are. And I would just say that how it came about is not necessarily a focus on diversity, but on a methodology for our business that, to me, the outcome is diversity because of the principles that we deploy. And for me, the way I liken it to is, first of all, you need a chair as an absolutely critical element to achieving that board diversity, who adopts, I would call, modern principles. And I'll liken that to my experience at IGO, which I felt was a relatively strong leader in diversity. And there I had this wonderful privilege of participating in the strategy that was deployed at IGO, and got to know the people who came up with that strategy. And behind that, there's a person named Mark Stigter. He wrote a book called Boards That Dare. And he was fundamental in the late Peter Bradford's work there and helped them create that outcome at IGO as well. We have Mark working with us at AVL, and what Boards That Dare, in terms of a framework, tells you is that instead of the traditional sense of finding people for boards, or in that case management, right, that are just doing the basics of they have the abilities and maybe the background and the skill set and maybe the industry that matches it. What his book says is that Boards That Dare look for people who they have the ability, they know, they have the knowledge. Those are the basics that I think are often deployed and maybe end up putting people on boards who are all male, middle-aged people who are maybe metallurgists or something, maybe mining engineers, and it limits you. But the rest of the spectrum is not considered, and I think good companies, and I think this is why if you've got a chair like our Cliff Lawrenson, he thinks this way. He sees his job as curating boards, not just with the can and the no, but the want. There has to be that strong desire to do big things and be bigger, and the R, as in your actual being, is such that you're there. And then lastly, but most important, is dare. And so our board, for example, they're each issued a copy of the book Boards That Dare, and in it Mark, and I think this resonates with what Anna was saying, he always signs his book and it says, courage and comfort will never be friends. And I think this is all about change. And when you try to adopt those kind of principles, it's very uncomfortable and it's setting the bar very high. And in our case, we ended up with a 50% gender diversity. I think we just end up with diverse opinions and people purely because we subscribe to getting people that have all of those elements, not just the no and the R, or the no and the can. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think when people do preface diversity as it just being a gender, and it certainly isn't. There's so many contributing factors. You spoke earlier in the week around your executive team. So not only at a board level, but just going down to that actual, more management executive level. What does that look like in terms of being diverse, and how do you ensure that you're, creating a platform for everyone to feel comfortable and be able to, talk about their diverse opinions and thoughts?
Sure. I think I'd first start by being humble and saying we've got a long way to go. Like, we are fostering the platform where diversity is where it needs to be, and I do think we're leaders in that respect. I think, again, at the starting point, at the outset, it comes down to if you're serious about doing good business, diversity is the outcome that will happen. And if you deploy the right principles, you're going to look at those elements I spoke about. And for example, if there's people on my team where on their CV, instead of just having the skills and the aptitudes for the role, they have things like Pride professional mentoring, and those things, you almost by necessity end up with people who have very diverse perspectives, thoughts, and they have all those basics that you need to in terms of skills and knowledge, but you then have diversity of thought. And I think as an executive team, we are not truly diverse on a gender basis, but our team has, in terms of nationalities, every single person basically is from a different country, a different upbringing. And so I think by deploying those same principles, you do end up with that outcome of very significant diversity of thought. And you mentioned creating comfort, I guess, and it is about psychological safety, but I would just highlight that change is uncomfortable, and so we have some tools. Like, one of the things that actually one of my executives in my team taught me many years ago at IGO was that to do these things well, and what the world needs more of is hard conversations. And so someone like me who's typically an avoider of conflict, we subscribe to this principle that the conversations you least want to have are the conversations you most need to have. And we actually write it on our whiteboard, and I try to make sure I have those conversations almost on a daily basis. And I find if you've got a team who is subscribing to that principle and willing to have hard conversations, it may be uncomfortable, but psychologically safe, and that's the platform that you can build that strong diversity. And where you can feel comfortable in that sense that your opinions are valued.
Right. So Anna, I'm keen to hear from you. What can companies do in terms of when they're actively engaging a diverse workforce and it is quite new to them? What advice would you get them just around getting maximum, that maximum comfort level for teams? So management may come in and it may not be common to them in terms of different cultures, different age groups, gender, everything. What advice would you get them to be able to manage that team effectively and bring out that diversity in the best way possible?
Yeah, so at the risk of using a sporting analogy, I will, because it will hopefully resonate with a few people in the room. Part of what we do in private equity, of course, is go in and help companies that might be doing okay, but really want to lift their game and or create value for their shareholders to do more. And so part of that is often around organisational assessment and review of the people and the talent and what they're hoping to achieve. So if you start with, I guess, the goal or the North Star where they're hoping to get to, that's always a good way to get everyone aligned and united. And so we'll sort of flesh that out. And then we'll talk about, well, what are the inputs that you need to get there? And inevitably, it's always a question around the people and the types of expertise that you need to get there. And we will talk about, well, if I was going to go and play a basketball game or a football game, you would never have 5 centres on a basketball court. You need a running guard, you need, point guard, you need someone in defence. And so I think if you can sort of normalise some of that and say, okay, well, for an innovation company or a technology company, we absolutely would like some software engineers, but we'd like people who've had different backgrounds, different experiences. Often now in software companies, some of the best coders are age 20, and they have a lot better skills than some of the folks that have been doing it for 20 or 30 years. So from a diversity of age, it can be quite interesting, those conversations. So we really basically line up and say, okay, well, this is where we are, this is where we'd like to go, what do we think we need to get from here to there? And we fundamentally believe part of that input is the people and the types of people that you can bring. And it's not always about the CVs or, does Anna's CV perfectly match the role she's going into? It might be that I'm a better communicator than others, or that I get joy out of solving problems. And I think some of those kinds of skill sets and a little bit to what Graham was saying can be super helpful if those people in the position of hiring and or influencing how the team evolves are open-minded in that way. Yeah.
Your decorated career in financial banking, you've paved the way and you've gone into a senior leadership role. How did you manage, I guess, the lack of diversity within the industry and really paved your way in that career to get to where you are today?
Sure. I think I quoted this yesterday. About 10 years ago, I was at an energy conference in Houston, and someone said to me, "Don't worry, I'll find you easily. You're the only brown woman in the room." Unfortunately, it's still pretty much the same situation. I was hoping it was different. Like, for example, last night I was looking around, and I was like, oh, actually, 10 years hence, we're still pretty much in a similar situation, which is not a good sign. And it means that, yes, we do the talk, but there are things that we need to actually implement. And not implement for the sake of, yes, checkbox, we've done our ESG report, we've done the woman on the board. That's a very compliance attitude. It's about actually, if you believe that, yes, your diverse teams will be better teams, you'll get better outcomes, then what can we do about it? And actually at Temasek, a few of us started the Temasek Women's Network last year, 2 years ago. And it had 3 key pillars. One is mentoring the women in the team, across the organization, mentoring the women. And again, someone can say, why only the women? Of course, it should be everyone, ideally. But just by today morning's experiment that I had, if you are feeling that sort of self-doubt, it helps to have a mentor just discuss and share with you how to navigate the corporate sort of ecosystem. The second aspect was just about inspiration, to show people that you can do that, you can achieve that. And for that, we started getting senior women in Singapore, as well as sort of like Singapore entrepreneurs. So it's a bit relatable that someone who went to the same school as me or same university as me has managed to do this. So we got the some of the founders of a fashion company, of a chocolate company, of various different companies, but local Singapore entrepreneurs. And then we also started getting, for example, Indra Nooyi, who's the former PepsiCo CEO, to come and speak. So to say what's possible, you can also be a CEO of an MNC if you just dream big enough, and they've also gone through their own journey and struggle. And then the third part is more about the training and the workshops, and if you're not confident, how do you speak publicly? How do you network if you don't like networking? Things like that. So those were sort of some of the 3 key pillars of the women's network that we started. And one of the most critical things, and I'm glad that Graham is here, is it's not women for women. You need the male allies because that is still the majority. So how do you actually rope them into being part of this? So actually now a lot of, we asked the senior management who would volunteer to be a mentor. And now, so actually a lot of our mentors are senior men who have volunteered their time to be mentors. The other aspect I just want to bring about is research has shown that you will hire someone who looks like you. And they've done all this research that they put a curtain and then you try to hire. If there's a curtain you can't see, you can't, if it's just without the visual, you will actually hire a different person than with the visual. So based on that, we've tried to have more diverse interview panels. It's unfortunate that this is there, but now that you know the research is there, how do you actually tackle that? So we're hoping that diverse interview panels sort of help break a little bit of that unconscious bias that we don't realize.
When we did catch up, we talked about the diverse interview panels is such a great example of how. And I still believe that like diversity, equity, and inclusion is certainly not going away. It's DEI as it's referred as, and it's an ESG reporting standard now, and it's something that needs to be implemented at a board level strategically as well. But would you say, from your experience, Graham, coming from a larger company versus being in a junior cap company that's really has a really strong growth strategy, is it easier to start with a bit of a clean slate?
Yeah, look, I think there's an interesting case study in our business that maybe bigger businesses should look at, in that I think there's 2 elements to our business that are very interesting from, this is all about enabling change, right? And there's this momentum that stops change happening, and in a smaller business, you can affect change much more rapidly. So in the sort of 16 months I've been with the business, we now have a board that probably looks very little like it used to, and we have an executive team that looks different, and there's a bunch of lessons in there for implementing DEI, but I think that at the heart of it is that change is possible. And when I reflect for my sins, I seem to be someone who is a fix-it guy in businesses, and I've been surprised to the upside that even in bigger businesses, there's a strategist, his name is Richard Rummelt, and he wrote a book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, right? And he basically says that change can happen swiftly in any business, and it is just upper management that gets in the way of it, right? And in these fix-it jobs, I've always had anxiety about changing people, right? But the reality is when they're removed, change is incredibly fast. And so for AVL, it's been a story of not so much that as just implementing that philosophy that I spoke about earlier. But in past experiences, even in bigger businesses where I have had to, with a team of people, correct people issues, let's call it, the change just happens so quick when you remove some of the, like 1 or maybe 2 people, right, that stand in the way. So yeah, AVL's had some advantages that were small. The fact that we're changing the phase of the business gives you that platform, but I would encourage bigger businesses to ask yourselves, there's a tool that I use, it's called fear setting, right? And you sit down and you think about these good changes that can happen, and the nature of human beings is that we're very risk averse. So this tool is you write down all of the terrible things that could happen, how you might mitigate those, but the piece of risk that people don't look at, and when you flip the page over on this tool, it's what if you don't do it? And I think there's change that can happen so fast in all businesses with a bit of good decision making and courage. So in terms of Mark Stigter that I spoke about, you need boards that dare, and they need courage, and then you need management teams that follow that lead from the top.
I think that's a really great point to even finish on. I think to your point, you really can't underestimate the retention of people, particularly within these super talent short markets where, I could guarantee that a lot of the companies that are presenting today, if not already, will experience quite a large, skill shortage. And I think one thing that the future-facing commodity world actually offers is you can actually look at a whole diverse level of experience, because we are entering into commodities that are quite new. So there isn't like a 20-year experience lithium mine builder in abundance in the sector. So they're actually being forced to look at different skill sets and how they can still deliver on those outcomes of the role. But more so the diversity, the equity and inclusion piece, where people feel valued, they feel like they can be themselves, they really love working for the company. It's a high-performing company, but they also have the retention of people. And I just think from a recruitment perspective, it certainly cannot be underrated, because it's talent short, it's high turnover. Like, there's a lot of room for improvement in the sector, but your views today have been really outstanding, and I hope everyone got something from it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Can I leave with one experiment based on what I did today? Once a year, if you just dress differently and go into your office, and then you just judge yourself. You are as capable as you were the day before. Just wear something different and just go into the office and see how you feel. And I think probably that will help you understand why diversity is not just a topic on paper, but you actually feel it, and you feel how someone who is visually different could feel. And I think then automatically all the policies and everything can sort of come once you feel it yourself. So I'll just leave it at that.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Panama. Thank you.
Well, you've all finished very, very early, I'd like to say. Press. All right, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. It's provided you with some food for thought. They've given us very kindly an extra 5 minutes for afternoon tea, so use it wisely, have some conversations, and you'll hear the bell ring in time to come back in for our final session. And you're all welcome to stay and enjoy drinks with us, conference drinks tonight from 6 o'clock out in the foyer after our final panel. Thank you.